Okay, folks, we're in our last interview for the evening. We got Justin Hollinrake from Ankeny, Iowa. Justin's a new candidate running for Ankeny City Council and at large, correct? Because they're all at large, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so with that brief introduction, and I just want to say Justin is a member of our coalition, has been a member for last year here, and Justin also ran a successful state senate campaign for Sarah Trone Garrett last fall. So congratulations on that. A tight one, but you won it in a Republican leaning district. Or actually, I should just say Republican district, just not Republican leaning. So with that, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes, Justin. So just tell us about yourself and your campaign.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Like you said, I worked as Sarah's campaign manager last year. Prior to that, I worked on the Cindy Ankeny campaign as a field organizer in 2022. That's also the year I graduated from Iowa State with my degree in political science. And I've been engaged in politics ever since. That year, I was also a clerk at the state legislature in the state house, so I got a front row seat to see all of the things that Republicans are doing to our state and all the harm they're doing. And this year, was just trying to figure out what to do with myself, to decide what can I do now to try to make a difference? Because I feel like we are at a point in our state and in our country where we all need to be doing everything we can because a lot of the things that we value are under attack. And so I started looking around my own community, Ankeny. I was born and raised in Ankeny. I went to school there, public school, Ankeny Centennial, where I graduated in 2020. And what I noticed as I was looking around my community is that our city government, which is currently run by some very old fashioned, old mindset Republicans, have created rules that have really excluded the next generation and just lower income people in general from the community when it comes to our zoning policies and how housing is built and how businesses are allowed to be built in our community. It's just so inflexible, so in difficult that you can't even build a starter housing in Ankeny anymore, let alone something that's fully affordable, like cheaper apartments. And to me, that seemed very, very wrong. That we were making this decision to exclude people using the power of government, and I want to make a change there. Some other areas I want to make changes is mental health is a crisis. I've heard that time and again during my involvement in politics, and it's something I've even had personal experiences with. And I can tell you that in Ankeny today, the services that are available to people who need mental health support, as well as our efforts as a community and as a city government to connect people to those resources are incredibly insufficient. And I believe that there are steps that Ankeny can take. We have the ability to take. We can afford to take them that would really help people get more care. I'd also say that I think that we can take inspiration from other communities throughout the state and the metro and see that we can have a community that is better about being pedestrian friendly, that is better about incorporating public transportation into our plan of how our city is going to grow and develop. So that way, once again, we're not being a community that is excluding you if you don't have enough income or if you're even around the middle level of what an Iowan is. Currently, the median income in Ankeny is over $100,000, and it's because if you don't have that much, you can't afford to live here. I personally know people I have worked with who were moving to the metro to work in Ankeny from rural Iowa But unlike past generations where they would have just chosen to live in Ankeny, they were forced by the high cost of living to pick somewhere else to live. I don't think that's okay. I think that needs to change. I think the city government needs to stop preventing that type of development. I think it needs to pursue the grant funding that is available from the county, state, and federal governments, as well as consider using our own tax incremental financing to support those developments. And I think that also the city has to be more responsible in the long term with understanding that those types of developments are the ones that are going to put us in a strong financial position so that we can afford to provide the excellent services and infrastructure that our community expects and deserves. And so overall, I just say I'm trying to bring a new vision and a new generation of leadership to Ankeny City Council.
Well, thank you, Justin. I have questions for you.
Mhm.
First question, from questionnaire. I had it here. I just lost it for a second. Give me a second. Question one of the questionnaire asks if you support or oppose paying public workers, including seasonal, a minimum wage of at least $20 an answer, $20 an hour. You answered that you would support paying permanent public workers at least $20 an hour, whether they work full or part. But you go on about to say that with temporary or seasonal workers, that you would have to evaluate that by case basis. Just to let you know, the position of the coalition is that all workers, uh, public workers, should be paid minimum of at least $20 an hour, because to us that's a living wage, and that doesn't matter if you're permanent or temporary worker or seasonal or non-seasonal. So, would you support paying at least $20 an hour to seasonal workers, be them, part-time or full-time? Because again, the position of the coalition is that every individual should be paid a living wage of at least $20 an hour. So you have 2 minutes to answer that.
Thank you, Mitch. Now, I'd like to understand here because when I look at some of the jobs that the city has posted, I've seen things like, for example, working the concession stands at football games. I recall doing that from my time when I was in school, and those were not jobs that people were working for the sake of paying their bills. Those were jobs that, from what I saw from my conversations with those people, it was just parents who were there just because they wanted to be there to support their kids and they wanted to make a little bit of cash on the side. That type of work, I don't think that makes sense to treat that as something that people are relying to pay their bills. And another thing being like lifeguards at the swimming pool. I mentioned in my answer that the concern I would have is making sure that we are maintaining the affordability of city services, because with the swimming pool, for example, anytime you raise the costs of the operations of the swimming pool, you have to raise the prices that you're charging the public to access it, because it's
But
not paid
also,
for.
we would go back and you say that there's 2 instances actually here just last week in the Des Moines Metro, where 2 lifeguards, younger lifeguards, saved the life of 2 young children. So to us, a lifeguard in the cities, municipalities around the Des Moines Metro over the last couple of years, having a hard time just filling them spots. So we think, even though they're part-time, even though it may be seasonal, like they are worth to just give you our position.
Well, I'd be willing to hear the case in
So
that
did you
case.
have any questions on that?
I hear what you're saying, Mitch, and I don't have any questions on that. I can see where you're coming from the swimming pool with the lifeguards. My I just think that when it comes to those where the city can't directly pay for it with the general funds, or it's coming out of an enterprise fund, and we are any amount that we increase the cost of the service or the cost of operating is going to result in higher prices for the public. I think we need to just make sure that we're not raising the price too much for the public. But as long as it can be afforded, I'm always a fan of paying people more. I always want there to be higher wages. I certainly understand the high costs of living of the city.
No. Okay, we'll move on to a second question, and that'll be the last one.
Okay.
Question 3 of the questionnaire. We asked, how can your city address this without punishing the homelessness, like what happened last year with City of Des Moines? And what services or programs?
I apologize, Mitch. You cut out first for me.
Actually, I think, well,
Okay, it's about, what's that?
oh,
Jackie, can you hear me okay?
yeah, but you froze.
Okay, let me ask the question again from the start. So in question 3, we asked, how can the city, your city, address homelessness without punishing the homeless? And what services or programs would you support? Because in your answer, you mentioned that a number of services provided within the metro, but were outside of the Ankeny area, should offer transportation for the homeless to access these services. Also with shelters and the services that shelters provide. So I think when we talk about the Des Moines Metro, a lot of folk candidates, elected officials refer to what the city of Des Moines is doing. What can the city of Ankeny do to provide services or better quality services within their own community? So there you are. Did you hear all that, Justin?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So I'd say we do have a few providers in the Ankeny area, or sorry, in the Ankeny city itself. A lot of it, and from the research I've seen, what does happen a lot of the time with with any homeless population in Ankeny is they do get essentially shuttled down to Des Moines. I tried to touch on this a bit in my answer, but I'll try to flesh it out here a bit more. I think that it is important that if the city is going to be sending over people, essentially making homelessness a problem for these shelters, and the city's not going to address it directly, that I think that we should be willing to provide some supplemental funding for it, because currently the rules in Ankeny are that if you find someone, you pick them up, you slap them with a fine. If they can't afford to pay a fine, which of course they're not going to be able to pay a fine because they're unhoused, then you force them to do community service. I think that's incredibly unproductive at actually helping someone become a thriving member of society again. And so I would be supportive of giving some funding to these shelters through grants to help them expand their operations, help them expand their services. I would want it to be part of a wider Des Moines Metro effort, because I don't want Ankeny to be the only community that's paying into that. But I do think that what my goal would be to bring all these municipalities and this county and the local government together to try to piece together the funding so we can help all of these people. Because I mean, it is just a waste of money, the current model, and a very inhumane model where we're just essentially having the police shuttle people down and throwing them out of the community and trying to make them someone else's problem. I don't think that's a good long-term solution. I think it's an inhumane long-term solution. And so I think that it's in the best interest of our community and the most moral thing to do to provide some funding to help these to help these shelters and help these providers increase their services in coordination with other government entities.